Ah! Oh no, you've injured your back. What will you do? Ah! Ouch! Here are some tips to recover and get back to training.
Hey everyone, Marcus Philly here with Functional Bodybuilding. I'm talking injuries today. So over the course of my competitive athletic career and life as a fitness enthusiast, I've been injured countless times, and every time it sucks. You blame yourself, you wonder if you're ever going to be the same again, and you want to know how can you heal fast and not mess up your body any further. Well, the truth is it still happens to me, and actually just a couple weeks ago, doing a kettlebell clean, something I've done thousands of times before, I tweaked my low back. So I'm going to show you what I changed up right away so that I could get back on track faster and heal my body quickly. Okay, I want to be very clear about something before we move on. I'm not a physical therapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a pain specialist. I'm simply just a coach who's worked with lots of different clients who have been through injury, and I've worked through my own injury history. When I was younger and I didn't know a lot, there were things that I did to try and recover or deal with my injuries that I would not do today. So I'm here to just share my personal experience with those things that I've done personally and as a coaching professional when it comes to injury. So let's go ahead and start with what is the normal response to injury, or what's the common response. When you get injured, it's pretty depressing. You are definitely going to wallow in some of your own self-pity, and oftentimes people are reaching for painkillers, muscle relaxers if they can get their hands on them, lots of anti-inflammatories, maybe they're icing, maybe they're just wallowing in their own depression, watching shows late at night on the couch and eating junk food. So first, I want to give you several lifestyle and nutrition tips that you can implement right away that can start the healing process a bit faster for you. So let's dive into that. Okay, for starters, let's talk about nutrition. This is perhaps the number one area that you have control over when you're injured. You might not be able to move the way you want to, but you can control what goes into your body if you can get beyond the emotional reaction and attachments that you have to food. So what we're aiming for is low inflammatory foods. Foods that promote a lot of added inflammation are only going to increase your pain. Remember, pain at the actual tissue level is an inflammatory response where nerve endings are actually getting signaled that there's something wrong with what's going on at the local area. That gets sent to your brain and it feels like pain. So if we can eat foods that help reduce the amount of global inflammation in our body, that's going to help us at the local level where the tissue's injured. What do inflammatory foods look like? Sugar, high omega-6 fatty acids, and alcohol. Lots of this is showing up in processed foods. So what I want you to do is I want you to immediately eliminate sugar in the form of processed grains and added sugar to food. Let's try and get as many processed foods out of your diet as possible. This is where lots of modified vegetable oils are getting put into your foods, which have high omega-6 fatty acid contents. Vegetable oils, things like safflower oil that are showing up in processed foods along with sugar. The sugar and the omega-6 fatty acid concentrations of those foods together are going to drive inflammation up. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to try and aim for more proteins, grass-fed proteins if you can. You're going to aim for vegetables to get your carbohydrate needs. You're going to aim for fruits to get your carbohydrate needs. You're going to look for whole foods as opposed to processed foods. I also want you to increase your fat intake from saturated fats and omega-3 fatty acids, because you're going to need to get enough calories in to keep your energy levels up and to help the process of healing. Saturated fatty acids are extremely important in tissue repair, so we do not want to skimp on those either. So by eating protein, veggies, and fruit with some added fats in the way of omega-3 fatty acids and some saturated fatty acids, you're going to be able to keep your caloric intake the same so that you can keep your energy up and continue to heal. One final note on the nutrition front. There is a tendency to want to cut calories when you're injured. This comes from the fact that, hey, I'm injured, my training or my exercise routine is going to be different, I'm not going to be burning as much energy. This is absolutely a common thing I see across the board, and I want you to try and avoid it. I don't want you to cut calories dramatically. Remember from my last nutrition video that I did, the bulk of your calories are actually being burned throughout the rest of your day, not in your exercise routine. So you still need a decent amount of your total caloric load to actually function properly. Not to mention, the healing process, repairing tissue, takes energy too. So use the tools that I provided you, the sources of foods, to get your calorie needs met. Do not cut them back a ton. I don't want you to be fearful of puffing up. Remember, if we can get you healthy faster and back to moving in the way that you love to move in your training, you're going to find your ideal body sooner and very, very quickly. So don't cut calories. Okay, moving on to the next lifestyle tip. We're talking sleep now. Sleep is perhaps the most important thing you can be doing because that is when a lot of the tissue repair is going to be happening. If you're getting good sleep, you're going to get great hormone production, which is going to support remodeling those tissues and getting your inflammation to come down. So it's time to turn off Netflix, it's time to get to bed, and let's use your sleep tricks that you know to improve the quality of your sleep. The top sleep tricks that I know are: make your room dark, turn out all lights, no electronics, get covers over your windows. Number 2, make it cold. Ideally, if you can get the temperature between 65 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's an optimal sleeping temperature. Number 3, I want you to turn off all screens about 30 to 60 minutes before you go to bed. Don't be looking at your phone or your iPad or the television. Try and wind down. Turn the lights down if you have dimmers. If you have blue blocking glasses, that blocks blue light that comes in, which is going to suppress melatonin production. We want melatonin to raise right before bedtime. That's going to help us get a good quality night's sleep. Now, one more note about anti-inflammatories. While I don't promote taking these chronically, consistently for long periods of time, in the window right after an injury, if the pain is sufficient that it's actually making your sleep worse and you can't get to sleep, then an anti-inflammatory that actually works to help improve your sleep by reducing the amount of pain can be a good thing. I will give myself about 3 days post-acute injury to play with anti-inflammatories to improve my sleep, but after that, I want to get back to other methods for actually improving the healing process. Okay, the number 3 tip is stretching. This is a complicated one and something that I've changed my thinking on over the years. When something is injured, when the tissue has been insulted in some way, I think the last thing you want to be doing is stretching that particular tissue. If you have a knee tweak, then don't go bending your knee a bunch. We got to let it chill out. But the tissue of your body that is close to, adjacent in the surrounding area of an injury goes through something that I've experienced and we see in coaching as a compensation model where it starts to tighten up and restrict movement so that you can protect that damaged area. What ends up happening is, in my case, I had a low back tweak, my glutes started getting tight, my upper back started getting tight, my hip flexors started getting tight, all because I'm trying to protect that area that's injured. But really, my glutes aren't injured, my hip flexors aren't injured, and so is my upper back. I want to keep those mobile so that I don't change my movement patterns over the course of the next many days and then end up with another injury on top of the one I already have. So I like to think, stretch the areas that are surrounding your injury and try and do it only in pain-free ranges. If something hurts, don't do it. That means you're just aggravating the already inflamed tissue and it's not helping, it's only setting you back a little bit. All right, and finally, I want to talk about heat, cold, and compression. So all 3 of these things are going to impact how blood moves and circulates around the injury that you have. Blood flow is the life force that is going to bring nutrients and healing properties in cells to your injury. We want blood flow. So anything that promotes blood flow to the area that's been affected is a good thing. Anything that restricts blood flow to the area might be something you want to be very mindful about using. So heat and movement and compression, these things are going to help drive more blood flow. Cold is going to limit and kind of restrict blood flow to an area. That might be good in situations where you want to decrease pain in an acute setting. So putting ice on a joint that is injured will decrease blood flow. It'll reduce some of that inflammation and swelling, but it stops giving more nutrients to the area to heal. If it's restricting blood flow, then it might decrease pain, which could help you get to sleep better, or it could help you overcome that acute period where the pain is so much you can't focus on work. So you can use it in certain settings, but ultimately what we want to do is we want to heat things up. We want to compress them. If we compress, then that helps drive blood out of the area so that new blood can come in, and ultimately we want to be moving it. Now, there are muscle stimulators that are out there, things like the Power Dot or a Mark Pro, and these are small. These are, units that create small contractions of muscles around an injured area, which helps drive blood to the particular injury to help aid in recovery. So those could be something you could look into, but ultimately movement is the recipe. Movement's what we want to be doing. So that's a great segue into talking about how are you going to approach your movement now that you're injured. How are you going to work around that injury so that you can keep the body going and you can use your own healing process within you to get back on track faster. So whether your injury is acute or chronic, you're probably going through some psychological distress around this. How do I move safely? Is this too much? Is this not enough? Am I ever going to be the same again? There's a lot of uncertainty around injury from a psychological standpoint. So I want to establish sort of a scale and a common language that we'll use going forward. So what I like to tell clients is, let's use the pain scale of 0 to 10. 10 being the most awful imaginable pain that you've ever experienced in your life, 0 being no pain at all. When you're moving and you're doing training around an injury, I try and tell people, let's not go above a 3. In most cases with injuries, it's impossible to have no pain while you're trying to move. A little bit of pain, a 3 out of 10 is acceptable. And we have to maybe push through a little bit of that. But anything beyond that, this idea of like no pain, no gain, I think is definitely misleading, and you don't want to go down that route of pushing beyond the 3 out of 10 on the pain scale when you're moving. Okay, the second guideline outside of the 0 to 10 scale is, how bad is this injury? Is this so bad that you can't use it at all? In which case, you shut down movement to that entire part of the body and you focus on all of the rest of the body. Hey, I broke my right arm. I can't use that arm, so I'm going to keep moving with my other 3 limbs in my trunk. And now lastly, there is the potential that your injured area is something that you can train through. You can use that 0 to 10 scale. If you can move through your injury with a modest amount of pain, then I do believe it is a good idea, because when you're moving muscles and you're moving joints, you're going to get blood flow to the area, you're going to maintain strength in those areas, and the general act of exercising and training and moving is going to elevate the right hormones in your body that are going to optimize the healing process. Now we have our kind of guidelines, general guidelines for training, and we're going to talk about training specifics. There's actually 3 areas of training that you can manipulate to optimize your potential success in recovering from injury quickly. So number 1 is slowing down. Tempos allow you to control every part of a movement. We're trying to raise the quality of our movement, not the intensity of our movement when we're trying to heal. We want to perform exercises with maybe long, slow eccentrics and isometrics. These are great ways to build back strength safely in areas of your body that are hurting. So take time in those strong positions, pauses, and slow down your repetitions. Additionally, when it comes to conditioning and getting some breathing and blood flow going, I want you to stop thinking about intensity. Nothing for time. We're moving for quality. You should be performing aerobic conditioning, sustainable conditioning, workouts that allow you to breathe and still have a conversation with somebody, move blood around, and perform safe exercises. You should not be racing against the clock, and in fact, go ahead and turn the clock off for a period of time. Okay, the number 2 training tip I have for you is going to be reduce and alter how you're loading different exercises. This is truly a time to return to body weight fundamentals. I want you choosing body weight options before loaded options in every situation. So that would look like I'm going to start doing push-ups before I get on a bench press. I'm going to start doing air squats or squats to a bench before I start doing back squats or loaded squats. If the body weight exercises that you're choosing are feeling good, then you can start to add load. Remember the 3 out of 10 pain scale? You can start to add load, but I want you to try and reach for dumbbells and kettlebells before jumping onto a machine or grabbing a barbell. The reason for that is with dumbbells and kettlebells, they can allow you to get into better positions often. If you have an injury, then your body's not moving optimally right now. And to try and contort your body to get under the load of a barbell or get into a specific position that a machine puts you in, it might not put you in the best position possible. So I always prefer body weight into dumbbell or kettlebell loaded exercises first until you can progress a little bit in your strength. Now, when it comes to loading and we're going from body weight into a loaded situation, I want you to be mindful about how quickly you're jumping up in weight. 5 to 10% of your body weight in added load at a time before you progress further. So if you're 200 pounds, 5% of that is 10 pounds. You're going to add 10 pounds to your body before you make a jump to 30 pounds or to 50 pounds. Be sure you can perform repetitions under the 3 out of 10 pain scale. It's easy to think, okay, air squats felt good. I'm going to go do a 135 pound back squat. My former self could back squat 350 pounds, so 135 pounds is not that much. But trust me, when you're coming back from injury, it's always better to err on the side of caution because 135 pounds on your nervous system that's a little bit on edge right now trying to heal this injury is going to be a lot to handle. So it will appreciate the 20 or 30 pound jumps versus the 135 pound jumps. Okay, my number 3 general training tip as you're coming back is to increase stability. I see a lot in different physical therapy environments and strength training environments, people are trying to change surfaces and use unstable things to try and help drive strength and adaptation. That could be standing on something that's wobbly, a wobble board or a Bosu ball, or using rings or things like that. Those have a place later on, but when we're starting from an injured state and we're restarting over at the ground up, we got to keep things stable. So what this means is I don't want to see you doing plyometrics or jumping. Number 1, you shouldn't be doing cleans, you shouldn't be doing wall balls, box jumps, burpees, things that are really dynamic and are going to have this high speed or impact and force production required. Number 2, and I already mentioned this, I don't want you jumping on soft surfaces. So you're going to get on a soft foamy pad or a Bosu ball or a stability ball, things like that. Save that for steps 3, 4, and 5 later on. Instead, start on solid ground. Start on a bench, seated, standing, where you don't have to add that extra element of motor control into your exercises. And then the last thing is these implements that add instability. So rings or TRX straps, or again with the physio balls. These are great tools and they have a time and a place, but when you're coming back from injury, it's not the place to start. So instead of doing a ring plank, just do a plank on the floor. Make sure that that feels great. Instead of doing ring dips, do a regular bar dip. More stability means you're going to be able to control your movement much better. Okay, finally, here are a few movement patterns and exercises that I have seen to specifically help in and around back pain. Now, these are not going to work for everybody, but they are things that I've seen over the years that have helped me recover from back pain and also strengthen my back so that I can avoid injuries in the future. So let's dive into them. Okay, so the first movement pattern is really the adductor and lateral core combination. This is the groin area of your leg as well as the low lateral sides of your back and your obliques. I kind of group these together because the movements that I'm showing you that really help build strength are going to put you kind of in this side-lying position to develop both inside and outside of your hip and your low back with adductors and oblique and quadratus lumborum strength. So the first one is the Copenhagen raise, and this is really going to target your adductors. The second would be a side plank hip tap, which is a pretty safe way to get into working on your oblique strength as well as your quadratus lumborum strength, which is a lateral low back muscle. The last one would be a lateral flexion extension, back extension. You're seeing that here performed on an incline bench. There are benches made specifically for this. In my gym, my home gym, I have to set up an incline bench with a foot pad to hold my feet down, but you can do this on a 45-degree incline bench. Now, strengthening these areas is going to help provide support and stability for lateral forces that might come into your low back. If you have weak obliques and weak adductors and a weak QL, you might not be handling lateral forces very well. So this can also strengthen you and bulletproof you for the future. Okay, the next movement pattern up is really single leg knee flexion or single leg work. So many times I see a bias and an emphasis on double leg squatting or double leg bending. And this is one of the reasons why functional bodybuilding programs that I write have such an emphasis on single leg squatting. So when we have side to side imbalances in our hip strength or our leg strength, what we can do is we can be putting unnecessary shear force on our low back. When we go to lift something up, one side is working more, it leaves the other side vulnerable. So by doing a little bit more unilateral leg training in your workouts, you can help to protect yourself, balance this out, and bulletproof your back. Two of the exercises that I really like that I've been using lately to help get out of my own pain are the lateral box step up. This can be done again, unweighted body weight before adding dumbbells, and then the knees over toes split squat. This is a great combination of flexibility and single leg strength that can ultimately help bulletproof your back for the future. Okay, the third back training tip is going to be a combination of a couple isometric holds that I really find to be useful. One, going back to strengthening the lateral core, but also strengthening and adding muscle endurance to the posterior chain. Remember, isometrics are when you contract, but you're not moving. So you're just holding a static position. The basic side plank is one of the best drills and one of the first drills that I would incorporate back into my own training after a back tweak. After I've actually started to feel a little bit better, I would add in the second one, which is the Sorensen hold. This is essentially, and you can rig this up in a number of different ways, but it's performed on a glute ham developer. And what I love about this exercise is that it really engages the entire posterior chain. So everything from the base of your head all the way down to your heels and all the muscles along your back are getting a great strength stimulus, but also an endurance stimulus. So you would hold this starting at 15 seconds and then build up to 2 minutes worth of static holds over time as you progress out of pain and you're getting into strengthening. So incorporate those two isometrics to really, again, give yourself a lot of endurance around the low back to protect it from injury later on. Okay, the final pattern that absolutely needs to get some attention is your hip flexors. We're talking hip flexor strength as well as mobility. This is a common area that is connected to low back injury, and for me, might be the number one area that I can always go to sort of uncover where my back pain is coming from. When my hip flexors get too short and they're stiff, I experience back pain. When they're weak and I try and do something too explosive, I can experience back pain. So some of the best exercises and stretches that you can do are as follows. Number one is the couch stretch. This can be modified a couple different ways depending on how much intensity you can take. There's the standard position with your knee all the way up against the wall, and then there are regressed positions where you're moving a little bit further away from the wall and you're not putting so much of a stretch on that hip joint. Then you can do hip flexor raises. This can be done with a band or it can be done with body weight, but this is simply activating the hip flexors repeatedly over and over again to get good training stimulus in there without fatiguing yourself or putting yourself in an unsafe position. And then lastly, after you got some mobility in there and you've got some base level of muscle endurance and strength, you can start to play around with pike leg lifts, tuck L-sits, or weighted hanging tucks. Any of these things are going to be isometric contractions or small contractions for your hip flexors, which can strengthen them over time and again, add a lot of bulletproofing to your low back so that you don't experience these injuries in the future again. So to wrap up today, I really just want to say I hope that these tips were helpful for you in some way. I thought about my younger self at 20 years old when I had my first big back injury and when I knew nothing and I was scared and I was uncertain about my future and I was truly worried if I would ever get back to being able to do the thing that I love, which was train. And since then, I have competed with some of the strongest and fittest people in the world, and I have experienced a tremendous amount of movement freedom, and I've also experienced more injury setbacks. So if there was something in particular today that was useful for you, or if there was something that you were surprised by that I talked about, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. And again, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.